everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Racing Insiders podcast. I am Kate Dillon from Crate Insider, and I am so excited to bring our next guest on. And he's like an unsung hero in the racing industry with so many different accomplishments in all kinds of racing. Now, what most of my audience will know him for is for the race fan, but he has a long storied history beyond that, which I definitely want to talk about. And if you have any questions about, well, pretty much anything racing that a racing engineer would want to look at, but especially if you have any race fan questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. So today I am introducing Ken Anderson from Grand Prix Engineering. So welcome, Ken. Welcome back to the podcast. You've been on the podcast before.
Nice.
So thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
I usually don't get invited back to things.
I don't know why. Of course you would. You are seriously like one of the nicest guys in racing that I have met. I know a lot of really great people, but like when I think of Ken, I'm like, he's just like such a nice guy. You are such a nice guy. And I don't know how you do that. Because you have been in the racing industry. I'm looking at this list here, and you really got your start way back in like 1979, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
After racing motocross for probably 6-7 years. Yeah. So
wow.
I moved to California, went to work for Fox. 79. Yeah.
Wow.
That was the first paying job I had in racing.
Okay. Yeah. Well, because you had to pay all your dues and the other stuff beforehand. So starting in motocross and starting at Fox, then tell us how you ended up over at Penske or with Roger Penske, because I know you were instrumental in getting started with getting Penske Shocks off the ground.
I got into, I went to work for Fox and became the general manager there and just designed a lot of stuff. And they were in motorcycles and motocross primarily, but as motocross bikes came with better and better shock absorbers, the market went away. And so I helped get them into off-road racing, which was like trucks and buggies and all that Baja 1000 stuff, Mint 400. And that was a natural progression from motocross, just basically four-wheel motorcycle, I guess. But then Roger Mears got a ride with the Machinist Union Indy Car team because he was Rick Mears' brother, and they were getting old cars from Penske and stuff like that. And they went testing with him, and after about 3 laps, the car started moving all over the place. And they said, "Yeah, the shocks are going away." And he's going, because I'd made Fox shocks for his off-road stuff. And he goes, "I can go 1,000 miles in Baja and the shocks don't go away. You tell me 3 laps around Atlanta and the shocks are going away?" So I made some shocks for his car and things went well. And he was third the next race and told his brother about it. So Penske tried him that year and they loved him, went way faster. And we ended up winning the first year in it. We won the 82 IndyCar championship with Rick Mears on Penske Shocks. So then down the road a bit, Roger hired me away to, he had done a deal with Monroe. And the thing you got to realize back in the day, shock absorbers were more promotional item. Nobody thought of them as a performance item.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want shocks? Do you want a jacket? Do you want a hat? So, and they just gave even the high-end racing, even the Formula One Coney stuff and all that was just a $2 shock and a aluminum body kind of stuff. Wow. So I kind of turned that around and I designed an original Penske shock in 1984 and started Penske Shocks. And first thing we did was sold them to Monroe to be rebranded as Monroe's so they could still advertise Monroe wins Indy. But and then in a parallel universe, Roger traded my services and shock absorbers to Williams Formula One back in '85. So I worked with them as well. Traded me for wind tunnel time in their wind tunnel.
That's incredible. And it's interesting, since the last time we were talking on the podcast, I've watched that Netflix show, Drive to Survive, and I just have a whole different appreciation for Formula One. So it's really incredible.
Yeah, people don't understand how big it is. It's a global global phenomenon, really. And it always has been. Formula One's always been way bigger globally than in the States, pretty much. But yeah, that's done quite a lot to help Formula One in this country.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're a big market. The United States is 5% of the global population, but we consume 25% of its stuff. So,
cool. Yeah, we are a nation of consumers for sure.
And we're the only nation in the world where poor people are fat.
True. Yeah, that would be thanks to all of the amazing additives in our foods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then, so when you were working like with the Formula One teams, were you, traveling with them and all of that, or were you kind of just in the design and prototype, or how did that work out?
I left. Ligier hired me. It made me an offer I couldn't refuse in late '88, and so I was technical director there. So in charge of all the design, and I was running our news race engineer. And then went from there to Onyx Formula One with Stefan Johansson and Bertrand Gachot and JJ Leto, who went on to win the 95 Le Mans, 24 Hours of Le Mans, and the McLaren F1 road car.
Wow.
But super nice guy. Really.
I didn't know like the 24-hour Le Mans was going to come in this too, because the next phase of your journey is working on the land speed record.
Yeah, I didn't so much work on that. What I did was I started to Chip Ganassi hired me away from Onyx. Well, Onyx shut down, so Chip Ganassi made me an offer I could refuse. And that was the early days of Chip Ganassi Racing. It was really the first year on his own. He had bought Patrick Racing and stuff. But it was obviously the only commercially available car was a Lola at the time. And the only people that were winning races in Lola was Carl Haas and Galmer, who had shops in England to make their own parts for the car. And so I took 3 or 4 of the best guys from the Onyx Formula One team, and we literally moved down the street from where Onyx was and started what was Chip Ganassi Racing Limited at the time. And then he went on. He did a deal with Reynard down the road, and we got the company back from him, and that became G-Force. And then that's the company that built Thrust SSC for Richard Noble. I didn't really have anything to do with the design process of it, but I put the company together that was able to build it and was there when they were building it. That was a very interesting project. It was because it was a lot like Chuck Yeager and breaking the sound barrier in the air, because they did not know what was going to happen. The fear was there'd be a shock wave. They understand more about supersonic stuff now, but it's in free air. When you got dirt out in front of you, there was a fear that it was just the shock wave would dig a big hole, 100 feet in front, and it would just disappear down that hole at 800 miles an hour. So, but it all worked out good.
No, that's really incredible. It's have you seen that new Oppenheimer movie?
I have not, but yeah, I want to see.
Oh yeah, you'll have to, because it just reminds me that when they were building and designing the atomic bomb, that they weren't sure if it was going to ignite the atmosphere and like literally destroy the entire planet. That was the biggest fear that they had, because they didn't really know.
Yeah.
So it just kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a spoiler or anything, but
what could go wrong, right? And what's funny is finding it used 2 Rolls-Royce jet engines, and finding a driver for it. It had to be an RAF pilot because it was basically a jet without wings.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to have no living relatives or wife or kids or anything, because they gave him a 1 in 4 chance of survival.
Oh wow!
So,
but he survived, right? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Good. So there's a happy ending to that story. That's good.
Yeah. All good. But that was a interesting project.
Absolutely. We got a couple people saying hi, so we're gonna say hi. I see Jeremy is here saying hi. So welcome.
saying how do you
Yeah,
know?
well, yeah, he didn't know you were here yet, probably. And then here's Scott. And to me again, it says, "Happy Monday from Earthquake Country." Probably said that. Scott is always like the first person who it comments on. Well, usually the first person to comment on the podcast. So, got to get that in there. Probably didn't even know you were, who was on here yet when that was going on. Well, the next phase of your journey, coming through all of that, was it looks like you were in. Well, you were with AJ Foy Racing, so you were back in IndyCar then, right?
Yes, that was all kind of the same time, 93, 94, 95.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was Robbie Gordon's race engineer at AJ Foy Racing, which those are probably two of the biggest egos, certainly the two biggest egos in racing, if not the world. So that was interesting.
That
We
sounds it sounds like there might be some stories
AJ had
there.
hurt his feet. Yeah, AJ had hurt his feet at Elkhart Lake. He broke his feet up really bad. In the first race, it was a 93 season. And the first race was in Surfers Paradise, Australia. And it's a, 20-hour trip to get there. So AJ didn't want to go. And we got there and we were so fast. That was the first race for Nigel Mansell and everybody was there. We were so fast. We were fastest first session. We used to have a practice and qualify Friday, then on Saturday, then the race. We were the fastest in first session, Friday qualifying, Saturday session. And then going out for qualifying on Saturday, the gearbox locked up and we never turned a lap. We were scared. And we ended up third in the race and all that. Well, which we thought we did pretty good. AJ was pissed. He must have got 10,000 texts, or they didn't do texts back there, calls or messages or emails saying you should stay home more often. Ooh. That kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. But,
yeah, that would definitely be a burn for sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then after IndyCar, it looks like you got into some of the NASCAR stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now have you always have you lived all over the world then with all of these different projects? I mean, it sounds like California and then England and then
all over the States for sure. In France, yeah.
Oh wow.
And then of course Formula One, it's every race is in a different country. So that was fun. I used to have to get extensions of my passport every year to because you run out of pages.
So. Wow, that's cool. And let's see. Dell is here, and he says, "Hello, Kate and Ken." Hey, look, see, you're here too, Ken.
Yep.
That's my friend Dell. And then Darren says, "Tell us a Robbie Gordon ego story."
We don't have all night.
Just one. How about just one?
I'm half joking. He's a good guy. He's very proud of himself. But that a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, he was always quick right out of the box whenever he got in. He started off in off-road, started off racing motocross and off-road. That's why he was like that. Rick Mears, motocross off-road. That's why I gel with these guys so well, because we kind of speak a different language. We know what a bump's like, in the shock absorber world. And like when I came to Indy, they were running 5,000-6,000 pound springs on the car and trying to run them really low, and because of the downforce. And it's like it was just way too stiff. And they say we only got like a half inch of travel, so we just pretty much lock it up. I go, well, or it doesn't matter. I said, well, if you only got a half inch, that matters. That better be a good half inch. So that's where certainly the IndyCar shock absorber world. So working with the Rick and guys like Robbie and stuff, we really gelled well. So cool. And then Robbie got out of IndyCars and got into NASCAR. So I did that with him for a while, and yeah.
Wow.
When Gene Haas, I worked for Gene Haas. He had just bought, I guess, as pretty much a turnkey operation from Rick Hendrick in 2002 or something. And for that, so I was a technical director at Haas Racing before it was Stuart Haas.
Okay.
And CNC Racing, but and then we built a new factory in wind tunnel. The wind tunnel. So
Yeah, I want to hear about the wind tunnel because I've actually been to the Aerodyne, the A2 wind tunnel. I've been to that one before, and you know, it's just pretty cool to be at a wind tunnel. Now, the one that tell us about the one that you designed and helped build.
It is. It's 180 miles an hour, full scale, with a rolling road, a steel belt rolling road that goes 180 miles an hour too, and the car can rotate plus or minus 8 degrees. When next time you come to Charlotte, let me know. I'll take you around there. It's pretty cool. It's got a 5,100 horsepower DC motor
Mhm.
that powers a 22-foot fan blade. So
It's incredible.
that's a race fan.
It's insane. The wind tunnel that I went to was the smaller one, so it didn't have. I mean, if you were going to have your car at Attitude, you would have to put like the sticks on it or something. It was really meant for
Yeah.
like a lot of the bicycle guys and that kind of thing. So it
Yeah.
didn't have all of that, all of those machinations. This almost sounds like it's kind of like a chassis dyno. If you know, if you've got this treadmill thing going on too, and I mean, you're
Well,
really going to
it's
find
got
out.
basically a huge, very expensive belt sander, but it also designed struts for the car that you could control when you get up to speed, you can control the ride height, go
Mhm.
up and down, sideways, roll, whatever you want to do. So,
There's so much to shocks today, and it's funny to hear you say how back in the day it was like, "Oh, yeah, you know, we have a hat, and here's a shirt, here's a shock," you know?
yeah, no, it was serious. Nobody considered them. They were just something to hold a spring, basically.
Mhm.
Didn't really, and along those same lines, that was one of the things they did at Fox was build a little shock dyno to be able to quantify these things. And so first thing I did when I got to Penske Racing was build a shock dyno, and then an iteration of that is what I started. I sold the first commercially available racing shock dynos. What was a Kurt Rohrig dyno was my dynos that Kurt Rohrig took over the software and started marketing as a Rohrig dyno. Because I never, to be fair, I never thought that you sell that made once you sold a dyno to a team, that'd be it. But then they had to have one in the shop. They had to have one in every truck. And then when you sold a truck, the dyno had to go with it. So you had to buy another one. I mean, Hendricks probably bought 100, 200 dynos in the last 30 years. Yeah, I figured they'd buy one.
Yeah, here's
Missed
and you'll use it
that
once
boat.
in a while or whatever, yeah. And now you've
Yeah.
got your, you know, well, heck, street stock teams and dirt late model teams that rather than scales, they're using the shock dynos to set up their cars on a weekly basis. So it's come a long, long ways. Well,
Yeah. And what's interesting too is the people don't realize how far the racing business has come with real racing products. You go back in the 60s and 70s, it was all production parts or handmade stuff that was, there wasn't any production racing items. In fact, I would say shock absorbers were probably one of the very first, Fox, when I brought Fox in and Penske and all that was the first thing that all we made was stuff for racing. We weren't a promotional offshoot of some big company. I mean, you had Stant had radiator caps, Hallebrand made wheels, racing wheels, but there wasn't a whole lot of pure racing parts. Cosworth made the first pure racing engine.
oh, okay. What's really interesting too,
Yeah.
and I wonder if a big part of that would be, you and I were on the phone today, kind of talking about just kind of talking about a couple random things, and you and I were talking about CNC equipment, and that you having worked for Gene Haas, and that tell us a little bit about the evolution of CNC equipment that we've seen in the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you go back, I mean, CNC equipment, CNC stands for computerized numerical control. So you had to have a computer. That's a machine. You had to have a computer. Rather than just turn handles, you had to have a computer running it. So they didn't really become, affordable until the early mid 70s because computers weren't, PCs weren't up to it. So and the first ones that came out were horrendously expensive. But when I was at Fox, we bought a Morosaki lathe, a little bitty lathe, the CNC lathe, and it was $1,000.
Like $300,000 or 100? How much you cut out?
That'd be $500,000-$600,000 now. I mean, that would have been, that's back when a house was 60-70 grand. You know, so, and that's back when the interest rates were like 18%. But you know, it paid for itself. But it was you had to have a pretty good bank that would back you up to buy them. And Gene came along and put out really good machine tools for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And he kind of got the reputation that they couldn't. Well, the idea is they couldn't possibly be any good for that kind of money, and they were. so yeah, he's done very well with that. He's opened up. I'd say, I don't know the fact, but I'd guess that 90% of the job shops out there, people that get drawings and they need to make 10 or 20 or a few hundred or something and move on to the next thing, are Haas machines. I mean, he is the single biggest machine tool manufacturer, certainly in the United States, if not the world. You know, there are bigger companies, but they ship 50, 60 machines a day. You know, he's building a 2 million square foot new factory in Las Vegas, just out there in Henderson, whatever.
Yeah, Henderson. Mm-hmm.
Henderson,
yeah, Henderson, Nevada. Yeah, I've been out there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's been, you know, because you need both. You need infrastructure and equipment, and you need knowledge as well. And I mean, I guess as an engineer, I mean, I don't know how you would answer this, but I would guess that you're probably a problem solver. Like you catch a problem and then try to figure out a solution for it. Would I be spot on there?
Yeah, it's all a puzzle. That's the fun part, you know. Figuring how do you do this, you know. I mean, the greatest thing of all time, I was just watching a special at night called Saturn V, was Kennedy says, you know, we're going to put a man on the moon and bring him back by the end of the century. Like, I mean, that technology did not exist, not in the least, you know. The show I was watching, they said they had 375,000 engineers working on that. Wow. And that was before cell phones, email, Federal Express, CNC machines, you know. I mean, what an undertaking that was, you know. So making a little race car part seems pretty small, but but like we talked about earlier, you know, being able to buy machines and make stuff like that has spawned the Jones manufacturings of the world, you know, making pulleys and, you know, CNC machine parts, and it's been great.
Well, and I think part of it's need too, because I know I've talked to my dad, and he mentioned that, you know, maybe it's that kind of late 70s, early 80s, where, you know, the rules for what you were following for your race car, you know, for dirt late models back then, is that you were supposed to be using, let's say, like Camaro front ends or something. You were supposed to do that, except for then the junkyards started running out of them. Especially as I think as maybe it was like because metal prices were up, and then, you know, a lot of this stuff was getting melted down, or it just gets old or whatever.
Yeah.
So you got to, you know, especially the body parts. And that's where you know, my dad worked with, did some work with Scott Braun, who started Performance Bodies there in Iowa. They were friends, and like, I think he started with making like some tail pieces or just something like that. I'd have to double check, but some of that was because, you're still following these rules, except for you literally cannot get this stuff. It doesn't exist.
Well, you know, the up until this last generation of Cup cars, the spindle was off a 1956 Ford pickup truck.
Yes. Yeah.
Truck arms are off of, you know, something else, and the cattywampus, you know, front suspension with a separate shock. That's off a 65 Impala or something. And that all came to be when cars went from a body sitting on a frame to a unibody construction. So they had to come up with their own frame, and you will use this. But yeah, the junkyards ran out and people started making, you know, there were people making 56 Ford truck spindles because that's what it had to be. I had to bill it, 5-axis. It had to have 20 grand in those things, and the whole premise was you can buy one at a junkyard for $10 back in the 50s,
Right. Yeah. Except for that it's unobtainium. I think we all learned a lot more about unobtainium, a couple of years ago during all of the supply chain stuff. It doesn't matter how much it is if you can't get it. You have to have it if you want to be able to do certain things. So it's a trip though. So their newer car doesn't have that 1956 spindle anymore.
It does not.
Oh,
no.
wow. That's exciting.
It's got single nut, and it's got stuff that are more like a 24 hours a Daytona car.
Okay.
It's got, well, what's funny is the all American series, right? It's an Italian car with an English transmission, Swedish shocks. Whatever.
Well, I think about almost everything is international at a certain point, anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to hear about how you started your own company, Grand Prix Engineering and Design, and some of the projects that you've worked on or consulted with. I'm familiar with Race Fan, but so tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, I started and design in 1984 as a side. I always had like a real job, and then that was consulting or whatever I was doing at the time. So everything kind of goes through that anyway. But yeah, we started. Harold Hawley came to me one day and said, "Well, everybody in racing ran the 19-inch 4-blade steel stamped steel fan off of, I don't know, 57 van or Chevy van or something, whatever it's off of. It's been
the 19-inch GM fan, yeah.
Well, the world supply of 57, 60, whatever it was, steel fans started drying up, and somebody had some made in China or something, but they weren't as good. And so Harold said, I can't get any more of these. And they always crack at the rivets, and they had a life to them. He said, "Could you make one of these?" And I go, "Yeah, I could. But if I was gonna make a fan, that's not how I was make them. That was made with, we got to make this for 75 cents or whatever to go on 10 million cars. If I want to do something, it wants to be a real racing piece." And so and the other thing too is it was what it was, and they were coming in boiling over every time, so it obviously wasn't moving enough air. And then they go to Florida and they were blocking off the radiator, so it's obviously moving too much air, So I just came up with, how would I do that? Going out, not because a lot of people have blinders and that's all they've ever seen, so that they see something different, so they don't really. Well, how can that be good? So I come at things, and that's the nice thing about being in all these different forms of racing. It's just monkey see, monkey do, and they're just not exposed to the things, And so I said, well, if I'm gonna build a fan, let's build something we can tune and replace blades hit, so something we can replace the blades, and that's how I came up with that, and it's worked out really well, so.
Yeah, really, really, really well. And it makes so much sense, when you see it, because you've got this hub and then you've got these interchangeable blades, and
the thing is, it was, I don't know, I don't even know what this. The GM fans are still over $100, $120, and my 6-blade fan's $360. Man, that's crazy. Who's gonna pay for that? I go, well, how much do you pay for your engine? Well, $50 grand. I go, well, And the thing is it's you bust a blade and you replace it. The biggest thing with steel fans, you bend a blade, it cleans the water pump and everything off the front. So that $100 fan just cost you $3 grand. So.
Yeah. I remember actually having that conversation with you, and I was like, okay, I have these $50 fans right now. And your 2-blade fan is like $170. Like, I don't know. I mean, people are going to yell at me. They're going to say like I'm ruining racing because racing is, crate racing is supposed to be affordable. And I was like so worried, and I was like, I don't know, but I don't know. I'm hearing good things. We're going to try it.
The thing is, people don't mind paying money if it's a fair price. People don't mind paying for it if it's a good product, and they are. I mean, this is the best, absolute best materials. Mil spec. I lose money on every bolt kit I sell because they are literal jet nuts and mil spec hardware and machined out of billet, so they're all round and all the same weight and all that stuff. And the other thing, a lot of people get into the merchandising side, is there's so many people that want to dip their beak, so to speak, on the way. You got dealers and distributors and all that you got to leave room for. So you can't just have, I can make it for $10 to sell it for 15 and I'll be rich.
Sorry, my cat.
Got to have room in there.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's been an incredible product, and obviously sold it for years. I'd love to know about how you decided on the materials of the center hub being a billet aluminum. I think that's kind of I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but it's a really it's a pretty straightforward solution. But the blade construction, I mean, that gets you into some material science. So I'd be curious. You got, I think, Kevlar or maybe some carbon fiber, and tell me about that.
It's well, again, being exposed to so many different types of racing, Formula One is really about materials and all. And still there? Yeah, sorry, I'm just coming. Like the whole, carbon fiber, that was invented in the mid 50s by a guy fresh out of school at Union Carbide or something. And back in like 1956, a pound of carbon fiber was $5 million. Till they learned how to make it cheap. But materials and strength to weight ratio is what kind of Formula One's all about. Getting back when they were light cars, you did everything to get the strength. So I got introduced to a lot of kind of fun stuff. The stuff I use in the blades is a DuPont Zytel, the special formulation Zytel. So it stands high temperatures. You can break anything. So if you made something indestructible, it'd take the next thing down the road. I'd take the water pump off or whatever. So I had to come up with something that was flexible enough to take some hits, but you hit a big enough rock, it's going to break. But be able to take chips and cracks and not fly apart. So it's been good. There's people out there. There's people out there that are 2 or 3 seasons on blades. They're so sandblasted you can barely recognize them. But and then there's guys hit a rock with first race.
You just never know. I see Michael's here. He's got a comment, and he says, "My car runs so cool with a 2-blade race fan in the spring and fall that I kid everyone that I'm going to run 1 blade and a counterweight on the other side too tired to build a little heat."
What size blades do you run? Is it 15-inch?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, so he'll have to.
Because of that, I'll send him smaller blades.
There we go. There's an option. Yes. Yeah. Well, and I remember when we first started, you had the 19-inch, and because it was like the junior.
That's what most. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I started getting the calls from the guys in the Midwest. Oh, he's running a 17. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Tell him to send me his deal. I'll send him 15.
Yeah, we'll get you blades. Some 15-inch blades there, Michael.
Yeah. You won the lottery tonight.
So I know we started with a 19, and I'm getting all these calls from the modified guys in the Midwest, and they're like, "Well, this looks really cool, but 19-inch fan is too big for us. Can you do something smaller?" And I'm calling you, and I'm like, "Heck, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They think they want it. I don't know how many to sell. I don't really know."
The problem is the tooling, because it's a really high pressure, really high temp tooling, and is really expensive. And like, if there's enough demand, I'm happy to make them. How many you want? Like 6. I
said I'd take a few more, but I
really, a blade. Is that okay?
but I was like, I don't really know, but I think it'd be good. I think there's a lot of those guys out there. And the next thing I know, I turn around. 70%. Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, we've got 15-inch ones too. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even ask for those.
Yeah.
So that worked out really good. We do get quite a few questions on race fans, on it just in general. So we thought we'd look back and see what some of those questions were. One we get is, how often should you replace your race fan blades?
Weekly. That's good for you and me, right?
Perfect.
I mean, honestly, there's no life. It's if they're running fine. I did have a guy that he had a set of blades that he'd had a little over a season on, and he said he thought that the car was running a little hotter than it was. Not much, just a couple of degrees. So I sent him some new blades to try, and it did bring it down a couple of degrees. And he sent them back to me, and they did feel a little bit, but they were sandblasted to hell, and they had a lot of miles. But if it ain't broke, and I've had guys, they get a rock, and they don't seem to get worse. They are what they are, and then they last for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had guys, lose a blade and still go on and win a race and not even know it until they come in. So, because the blades are only like 100 grams. So especially if you got like a 6 blade. If you had a 2 blade, I don't know if the 1 blade would work.
Yeah.
But if you had a 6 blade, it probably is not going to be that big a deal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that leads to another question. Should I replace chipped race fan blades? If they're chipped, should I replace them?
Depends on how bad they're chipped. If it's got a little ding out of it, that's always just a little one hit wonder. The material is it has glass fibers all in there, so it's very strong in a lot of directions. So the cracks don't grow like it typically does, like in metal and things like that. So if it's just a little chip, don't worry. Much as I'd like to sell you another blade.
Yeah, but we like to be honest too. And so we talked a little bit about what you got started in there, and have you worked on any other have you dabbled in anything else other than shocks and in fans, as far as some of the things that you've designed and developed for Grand Prix?
Yeah, I designed entire cars. I designed the first. Well, I wrote the rules. I wrote the rules for the Tony from in the Speedway. When they started the IRL, they hired me to write the rules. So I had to come up with the rules for them. And then I went on to design the very first G-Force car, the Indy car, in 1996. And then that went on. That's the car that Ari Leyendijk won the Indy 500 with, and Tony Stewart was the champion that year in that. So yeah, I designed the whole car there, and I've designed Formula One cars. I've designed USF1 that car. So
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess I just wasn't aware of it's every system and putting it all together. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it all relates to each other, but it's
it does. And what's getting sad now is it become too many specialists. The left hand doesn't really know what the right hand's doing, and a lot of these, I was in Formula One drawing offices with 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're 1,000 now, you ain't nothing. But it gets to a point, once you get to a certain point, it's like herding cats. It's the paperwork and getting people to work together. It's just mind-boggling. But that's where they've chosen to go. But
project management makes it tough.
Oh yeah, crazy. And which brings me back to like the whole space program and stuff. That how they handled that is beyond me. There was no email. There was nothing.
And then you compare that. I just watched that documentary on putting the James Webb telescope up in the air, and the James Webb. Telescope, the latest one. And it's pins and needles, and it just all the things that went wrong along the way, and like all the points of failure that you could have. And I think it was like 237 points of failure. If anybody has seen it, they can jot that in there. And so many of them were this whole solar shield that they had going on, and then you're way too far away to be able to do anything about it.
You don't send a tow truck, do you?
Oh no, you can't send
it. Those are real guys. Guys do that.
That's really, really crazy. Well, you've probably seen a lot of mistakes that racers make over the course of time too. And what do you think are some of the biggest cooling mistakes? And I know a lot of people think, or the phone calls that I get, some people tend to lean towards thinking that a fan is going to solve all of any kind of cooling issue. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. No, the single biggest mistake I see people make is double pass radiators.
You think double pass radiators are a mistake?
Yes.
Really? What is your opinion?
It's not an opinion; it's a fact.
Okay.
Single pass radiator is much more efficient and uses much less horsepower.
Wow.
Much less.
Wow. Interesting.
Every Indy car, every stock car, every Formula One car has a single pass radiator.
Wow. Because we would generally recommend double pass. So, I mean, I'm listening.
Well, the problem is where it's come from is people think, well, if you slow the water down, it gets cooler, which is true. But the problem is it's getting cooler in the radiator, but it's getting hotter in the engine. You're not looking for a differential temperature in and out. You're looking for heat rejection, which is a completely separate issue. So, and they also think that it's slowing it down. Well, it's slowing it down because it's choking. You're taking 30, 40 gallons a minute and turning 180 degrees. That's a huge restriction. I haven't put one on dyno, but it's got to be 10, 20 horsepower.
Yeah, well, I do know that it takes a certain much higher percentage of water pressure to push through a double pass versus a single. And we definitely say don't use a triple because it takes even more. It's a lot. And yeah.
It's like a square. It's like 4 times more for a double and 16 times more for a triple.
Yeah.
I've done the test.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. And you don't even sell radiators, so it's like you don't even have any. You don't have a horse in this race here. So
I will now. And the other thing the best cooling system is a single pass radiator with with some sort of remote reservoir where you have an air spring and a billet cap, not a cap. As soon as you pop off a radiator cap, you lose all the pressure. Like I don't have the chart in front of me, but if you can get pressure up to 30, 40 psi and keep it there, I mean, you can run 230, 240, no problem.
Right. It's only when you're pushing water that you start really having an issue, right?
Once the radiator cap pops, if you don't have that's the other mistake is people don't typically run a return tank because a radiator it's got 2 valves. It blows it up, but it also sucks. It'll suck the water back in as it cools down. If you don't have that catch tank for it to suck back in, then you're not replacing the water. So next time you start up, you'll never get the pressure.
Wow, kind of like a check valve in a plumbing system.
If you fill a system full of water, as it heats up, it's got to have a place to go.
Oh, okay.
So that's how the radiator cap, you get a 30, 40 psi radiator cap, which they're never that's typically how tight it is on the fitting to it's only a quarter turn little deal anyway. So that 30 psi is plus or minus probably 20 psi.
Yeah, I mean, I learned that talking to Art Lentini over Art's Radiator, and he said he gets these made, but he discovered that he'd get them in and that there could be a massive difference. So he actually built something so that he could test each and every one, and a bunch of them end up in the trash. I mean, it's just that spring, and there's that spring and that little piece of metal, and but
then when the water expands and it goes into the catch tank, when it comes back in as it cools down, it's pulling a negative pressure in the radiator, and unless you have a hose to the catch tank to go to the other side of the radiator cap that has a check valve going the other way to suck the water back, then the next time you've got a void in there, and the next time you fire it up, it'll never get the pressure.
Wow, that's incredible.
But if you run an O-ring cap and it's basically just a shock absorber floating piston with 30 psi in it, so the water has a place to expand and then it comes back.
Well, and it's also a pressurized system is what you're recommending as well, correct?
Yeah, pressurized system. I mean, they run like Indy Cars, Formula One cars run 75, 80 psi. Yeah, but I don't know. Most of the radiators of the dirt guys run probably wouldn't take that. 20, 30 psi. If it's a consistent 20, 30 psi, it's fine. The problem is when you run a radiator cap, you puke the water out because it's expanded, but you don't get it back in the radiator. That's where your problem comes in. Then it'll cavitate and you never really get the pressure.
Yeah, cavitation is definitely something that's uh, it can be a problem in all kinds of pumps, whether it's power
Oh, yeah.
steering or water pumps, and I mean, what happens? I mean, when you've got that cavitation would be where we've got bubbles and we're introducing air. Is that correct? Or how would you
Yeah,
describe cavitation?
it's a negative pressure. It's like if you take, you're not really introducing air. Like if you ever taken a syringe and putting your finger on the end and pull it back,
Mm-hmm.
it pulls a void and there's air there, but you haven't brought it in, and then you let it go and it snaps back. That's cavitation. So
Okay.
yeah, if there's anywhere for air to come in, that's how it comes in. But it's not so much the having it. Well, it's the negative pressure. Then the boiling point just goes crazy. So the water where that negative pressure is, the water just starts boiling immediately, and it
Mm.
pushes right through the engine. And
Okay.
that's where like a double pass or triple pass, you're slowing it down the radiator. You might get 10 degrees, 10, 20 degrees. I mean, I put down and all that, where you're getting a big pressure differential, or not pressure, temperature differential. But, for every 10 degrees they're doing in the radiator, they're building heat in the engine that they're trying to get rid of. So, again, like a Formula One, and they've spent millions of dollars researching this. I mean, basically, you want the highest flow as you can get, and they typically only drop a degree or two. But they get to the temperature, it'll be 205, 210,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be 210 going in and 209 coming out, but it'll be consistent because it's rejecting the heat to the air.
Yeah, because that's also an issue where you don't that whole differential kind of a situation
Mhm.
is it can definitely be a problem, especially at startup. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I was talking about thermostats a couple weeks ago and
Mhm.
how you don't want it to be too much. You don't want to have this big rush of cold water, when you're trying to warm up and vice versa.
That's why, again, Indy cars, Formula One cars, put heat, they warm the water before they bump it over. So, which would be a
Oh,
real pain in the butt in a real life
yeah.
situation. But yeah, there's a happy medium. Happy medium.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on whether the fan should be half in or half in, half out of the shroud, completely inside a shroud? What are your thoughts on that?
The from purely moving air standpoint, having a shroud complete of the blades with the blade tips touching, that like on a wind tunnel, the blades actually scrape the wall pretty much. In fact, the GM wind tunnel, they have balsa wood tips that create a seal on it. So that's in terms of actually pulling air through, that's the best you can possibly be. Now, the practicality of having something perfectly round and, and, and,
And bumping, yeah.
sit up in a corner, all that to do that. I, I'm a fan of having not blades not touching, but if nothing else, keeping rocks out, because most rocks come up from the bottom and catch them coming up. If you have a shroud coming back to the blades or a little bit behind it, even if you got a half inch all the way around it, it helps make the fan live longer because it's not getting rocks kicked up.
Mm,
So
that's interesting that's where most of that's coming from is from down
yeah,
below. Rather, I just hadn't really thought about that.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. And
yeah,
And I like how you also talked about it being flexible and almost like designing it as a point of failure so that it didn't have full carnage. I mean, if you do get a big enough rock, it's going to take
yeah.
out a blade, but isn't going to cause all of the carnage of taking out everything that's in front of the engine.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
I'm sure you've probably had some racers tell you some stories about how much your fan has saved like a whole bunch of other equipment.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I'm still running the Benji Hicks video
Mhm.
on the website. Best sales tool ever.
Oh, it was such a fun story, and for
Happy to
anybody
buy
who
more blades. I'm happy to sell.
yeah, well, it was just such a fun story. I mean, I go to Virginia Motor, and Benji comes up to anybody who hasn't heard this. Benji Hicks comes up to me, and he's got these, like, 3 race fan blades, and the edges are just shredded, and I'm seeing these in his hand, and I'm just like, oh my God, he is coming to me to yell at me for selling him this, like, that this fan broke. I mean, because I've never seen one of these break before. But he came to thank me because his rack came loose in the heat race, and it came up and it got into the fan, and the fan took all of the damage, and then it didn't knock out his front drives or his water pump or anything else. All he had to do was put his, I think he had to replace his rack and a radiator.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was very, very happy, and he had spare blades in the truck. So worked out well. I was like, okay, we're shooting the video.
That was great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Well, and well, one thing that's fun too, I mean, definitely appreciate for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, a lot of you probably do, but it's me and my brother, Jimmy Schultz, who organized the Cars Racing Show. And big thanks to Ken for always supporting the show since we brought it back in 2020. And this year you've come on as one of our sponsors, and super grateful for that. So for anybody who's watching and wants to meet Ken in person, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to have stories to tell or questions to ask.
Oh, yeah.
But Ken, you'll be there January 5th and 6th in
Mhm.
Hickory, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and tell us, I mean, maybe a little bit of a plug for the show, but what's your experience been like at the Cars Racing Show?
Oh, it's been great. Yeah, it's I used to like going to PRI shows in Orlando, but not that. I used to live in Indy, so going back there in the wintertime is not that appealing to me. And it's just gotten so big, and it's a good show, but it just doesn't really suit what we're doing. But yours is much more grassroots racer. It's small. It's more bite-sized chunks, stuff you can really take in and do it. And it's nice seeing people, and it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually get a chance to talk to people.
It's a very good show. It's very good for us. So yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, we're 100 and
Give us,
something booth show
we're always
versus
on pole position. That's
thousands.
all.
What's that?
We're always on pole position, so that's always
You
good.
are, yes. Ken is always the very first person to respond to any email or anything else, and he's the very first booth when you walk in the show. So, that's a wonderful position to be in for sure.
So if you haven't signed up yet, sign up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I haven't started selling tickets yet, but I'm selling booths right now, and talked to a lot of people, and we're gonna have a pretty filled out floor plan here real soon, and working on the website. It's it's funny. It's not hard to build something, but when you have to maintain it and like change all the dates on a yearly basis, I don't know why that's so like, okay, did I catch that one? Did I catch them
Yeah.
all? So it's
Yeah.
it's always fun. Oh, and actually Michael says that's where he bought his fan at the Cars
Okay.
Racing Show. So that's really cool. Well, cool deal. Well, hopefully we'll get you to come back this year as well. Any other
Yeah.
life lessons or words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience, Ken?
Gosh. Just don't be afraid to widen your horizons and see what other people are doing and why they do it, and try to understand why you do what you do. In racing, it's don't just blindly follow somebody because he won the last race. I mean, he may have been pure luck or something else you don't even see. So that the devil's in the detail, and there's a lot going on in a race car. Yeah, so many moving parts. I love how people, when I go in the corner, does this and it does this, it's going like this all the time. So you don't narrow it down to little bits like that. It's kind of a controlled explosion. So yeah,
That's true. That's true. And a lot of different factors that, a lot of different there's no like control thing. It's
a lot
it's
going on.
so many different options on that. Well, Ken, I want to thank you so much for being part of the show this week, and being on here and learning some things. I'm definitely going to be digging into a little bit more on the single pass radiator. I'm gonna be
We'll need
doing.
to do a package, Crate Insider.
Yeah, we'll have to figure we'll figure something out. I mean, I have radiators, but I've always sold double pass, so I'm I don't. Why does this stuff get harder? I have to have more product now. My building is not getting any bigger. But thank
Be
you.
radiator queen.
Yeah, I'll do what I can. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here, and for everybody who's listening or watching. Of course, you can catch me live every every week on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern on both Facebook and on YouTube for the Crate Insider channel. And then if you would like to catch it as a podcast, just the spoken word, you can catch us the next day on an Apple iTunes podcast, whatever you want to call it, Spotify, Google Play, all of those different things. A couple last minute comments here, Ken. Then Shane and Dunning say, "Hey, Kate and Ken, very enlightening show. Thank you so much for being here." And Darren says, "What a great show. Thanks, Kate and Ken." So thank you all for being here. It's been such a pleasure working with Ken, for all of these years. And next week, I'm really excited. You probably know this person, Ken. I'm going to bring on Cody Haskins from KRC Power Steering. So I know he's one of your dealers too. So
Good guy.
yes. So look,
guys, other than you, you're a good girl.
Oh, thank you. I get to kind of stand alone. So thank you all. Thank you everybody for all the things, and feel free to, drop in comments and everything else. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. So have a good one, Ken, and for everyone out there, thank you.